Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure Podcast. My name is Nikki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts and ideas and hopefully some inspiration on how to build more adventure into your everyday life. So today it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Henry Druce to the show. If you're a regular listener to this show, you'll know that one of the questions I frequently ask my guests is, what is the unexpected benefit your journey has brought you? And the reason I ask this question is because often I think we set out on an adventure or we take something on with a specific goal in mind. But actually, some of the true benefits or some of the things that we get from those adventures are often not the thing that we set out to do, even if we do achieve that end goal. And one of the unexpected benefits and really privileges of my podcast journey has been the willingness of my guests to share their often very personal stories with me. And this could not be more true of my guest today. So Henry is a father, a husband, a skier, a mountain biker and freelance journalist. And for over 20 years, he was the editor of the UK's best known snowsports magazine, most recently known as the Telegraph Ski and Snowboard magazine. But the reason I wanted to speak to him today, and he agreed to come on this show, was to speak about his very personal journey, transitioning away from a role he did for so long and for which many considered to be a dream job, and indeed he considered to be a dream job, to following a different path and going through a pretty challenging experience as a result. So this episode is taking a slightly different format. We're going to be slightly longer than usual, but I hope you bear with us because Henry's story is really worth listening to. And I know will resonate with so many people in terms of both their own experiences and those of friends and family as well. So just as a trigger warning, this episode does cover topics such as mental health, depression and burnout. So if any of these subjects are close to home for you, do bear that in mind. I will be posting links in the show notes to some charities and some organisations who do very wonderful work in the area of mental health. So please do reach out if that is something that resonates with you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Henry and we're going to hear more about his story. So Henry, it's brilliant to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast. My first question really is, where did it all start? What inspired you to move into journalism, into the snow sports industry? Where did the motivation come from?
Well, Nikki, thank you very much for having me on your podcast. It's an absolute honour to be on it. It's fantastic, especially because I know you as well. So it's terrific. So I suppose really it comes from ignorance and arrogance. And I like to think it's primarily ignorance. That when I was growing up, I did work experience at the Windsor and Eton Local Express and at the Henley Times. I think it was the Times or the Herald. And I thought, I like this. This is really good fun. I can do this if nothing else comes up.
So, I mean, it's one thing to get started down that route, but I think to keep going for such a long time, and I guess to move into such a difficult part of journalism. How did you get, I guess, your entry point, and then what happened from there?
So the work experience was massively helpful. And then I applied to Bristol Poly, but they had a really good humanities course, which had tremendous links to the BBC in Bristol. So a lot of people who wanted to get into the media, whether it was radio or television or written journalism, went on this course. It was very established back then when there weren't so many avenues when I was studying, because obviously it was back when the dinosaurs were walking on the earth. It was so long ago. I did this course, which was great. The truth is, I spent far more time partying. And when I actually look at the course and what I actually got from the course, and there's no disrespect to the professors and the lecturers, they were really good, but I wasn't a great student at all. And probably the most useful thing I did when I was there was work on the student newspaper. So somehow I managed to work on the university paper as a poor cousin to the university attending the Polytechnic. I'll just tell you one funny story. Well, it makes me laugh. that I became the arts editor, and I used to be part of a comedy review group. There were 4 of us, and it was called Quad. And if you read the reviews about Quad, I think one of the quotes was, "This is the next Monty Python. Seriously, seriously funny." I wrote the review. There we go. So there's a confession.
That's the power.
And I tell you what, ever since we got that review, which I wrote, we had sellout gigs in Bristol.
And it's made me like really intensely suspicious now of any reviews in the newspaper, because I'm like, who's their mate writing on them? Brilliant.
It was outrageous when I think about it. As I say, that's come time. I think 35 years have passed, so I can actually fess up to it now.
Awesome. So you made the move into actually journalism proper from there, I'm assuming.
I was going to say, so after finishing studying at Bristol Poly, having worked on the student newspaper, the contacts I made at the Polytechnic, all these people who were aspiring journalists, really, and I took a year out after. Most of them went straight into work. So when I got back from my year out of traveling in Australia, actually, some of them had already got entry-level jobs. And one of my colleagues at the Bristol University paper, she said, "Oh, I know at Haymarket they're looking for sub-editors. Why don't you, apply?" And I said, "Well, I've never done that before." She said, "Oh, you'll be fine." So I met the editor, and the magazine was called Litho Week, which is about the print industry, which I knew absolutely nothing about. But he was a very talented editor, and he employed me. And at that time, I was earning £120 a day. So it was a significant amount of money, because I'd applied for a specific magazine journalism course, which was due to start 3 months afterwards, after I got back. But I started doing this gig, and they kept me on and kept employing me. And I thought, well, what's the point going on a course? I learn on the job and get paid. With some papers now, to their absolute shame, don't pay a lot more than that as a daily rate for freelancers. Gosh. Shocking. So after about 6 months, I'd been eyeing up this other magazine in the Haymarket stable, which was called Outdoor Action. As you can imagine, that much more floated my boat. Primarily walking, but it covered mountain biking, archery, multi-activities. Fantastic. There was a great editor, and I stayed there for 7 or 8 years and became deputy editor. And at the time I thought, wow, I will never, ever get a better job than this. It was fantastic. A very, very happy time. After that, the magazine got sold to a different publisher, because I don't think it ever made any money. And I knew that I'd actually done my time there. It would be brilliant. And I thought, I don't like the way this is going. So I went off and did a ski season, aged about 29, 30. And as far as professionally, people, I was freelancing. I just was unavailable. I was booked. What I was actually doing was working a ski season, which changed my life, because I met my now wife, who was working as a chalet girl there. But I was the host. I'd show people around the slopes all day while she was busy cleaning the chalet. I mean, it was she had a tough job. I had a very easy job. It was
having done both. You got the better deal, definitely.
Definitely did. What was so wonderful about this job, your primary concern was, where are we going to go tonight? So it was a really special time of no responsibilities and just a good time. So I did that. Then I came back. I freelanced for loads of different publications, papers like, the News of the World, The Independent. And then as part of that, I got a gig doing some freelance work for, as was then, the Daily Mail Ski and Snowboard magazine. And I thought, this is the magazine. This is for me. And the long and the short of it is that after freelancing there for many years, the editor at the time decided to move on, and I pitched myself for the job, and I got it. So when I got it, I was just over the moon. I thought, this is a dream. And the reality is it was an absolute dream, but not necessarily for the reasons people think, because understandably they would look at the job and say, well, and you get to visit all these resorts and you travel in the winter and do all this amazing stuff. And it's true. I must probably spent every winter for the best part of 20 years. I'd be away for, say, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, helping to host trips for the magazine. And then I'd go on press trips and I would go to various resorts if anything new was happening, especially if it was a lovely hotel to go and check out. Incredible. And every trip I went on, I can promise this is true, that I would be pinching myself going, I can't believe this is happening. I am so fortunate. But as I say, that was really, on a 52-week cycle, that was 6 weeks of the year. So it's actually quite a small percentage. And most of the time I was in an office commissioning content, editing content, coming up with the concepts and the ideas with many of the brilliant people I work with. That was the gift. And I always said to people, and I still say it now, if you like producing magazines and you like skiing, yes, this is the ultimate job. It's the ultimate job. So I did have, without question, for me, the ultimate job. But as I say, I hope the saving grace was I always knew it. I never, ever took it for granted. And I did say to myself, if ever you take this for granted or ever it feels like a job, you must leave, because it's not fair to the magazine. Because the thing is, putting magazines together, if you're going to do it to the best of your ability, is bloody hard work. It's proper full on. It's not a job. It's an absolute passion and a devotion. And you can't dial it in, because if you do, they'll know. The readers will know. So I did that, and it was, as I say, for 15, 16 years, the best, without question. Then things changed, different ownership. So it was, when I joined, it was the Daily Mail for about 10 years.
Yeah. Then
it moved to an independent publisher, and that was a very special time. So it's very independent. My role kind of changed, that I had to become a lot more commercial. And that, do you know what? I loved it. Then we moved to the Telegraph. And when we moved to the Telegraph initially, terrific, because the whole role had changed. When I started out, my job was as a magazine editor. It had morphed into editing a website. The magazine was a very important part of it. Social media channels, they were really growing. And so I had to get a handle on that too. So it changed massively. And at the Telegraph, very commercial, but in a different way. And it was dealing with a really big corporate. And after a while, I started losing the love for it, because it started becoming a real job. And to be true to myself, I'd always said, if it starts becoming a job, you've got to leave. But I couldn't, because so many people said to me and echoed what I felt as well. This is a dream job. You will never get a better job than this. I'd said this to myself before, and here I was 18 years down the track, having had amazing experiences, amazing times, and it was part of my identity. This magazine, almost as much my wife and children, it was an element, it was like a limb. And I had to come to terms with moving on. And I didn't, and I stayed, and it started to really take a toll, because, I'd be getting up at 5 in the morning, getting back at 8. And when something's your passion, it doesn't really matter. When it starts going a bit sour, then it becomes really tough. And then you start, I started seeing the bigger picture. What was I doing? This is 5 in the morning, 8 o'clock at night. I was away quite a lot during the winter. Here's my family. And one day, it was about a year ago, No, do you know, I knew I started having real serious issues with sort of motivation, and I knew something wasn't right. It started about 3 years ago, and it started becoming a job, which I said I'd never do.
Was there a moment where you suddenly went, okay, this has changed? Or was it that it was a sort of a gradual realization?
It was building up. There's no question. I took some time off and said, I need a break. And I have to say the Telegraph was brilliant, very understanding. I took most probably about 6 weeks off, and then I came back and I was supercharged. And I just felt like the bionic man. I was the $6 million man. I was just so glad to be back. But, it was fake. And now I look at it and think, somehow you did that. And it was genuine in the sense that I really was fired up, but it was totally unsustainable. Like a seesaw, I went from one side, swung straight up to the other and powering on. And then I crashed again, but I carried on for almost probably 7 or 8 months. And then it happened again. It was just over a year ago. Well, I just nearly finished the first issue of the magazine for the season. Yeah, there were 2 things that happened. One, I had an interview with Ranulph Fiennes on the phone. And the thing is, I'd interviewed Ranulph Fiennes before. And anyway, I didn't prepare properly for it. I interviewed him, and it was a rubbish interview. And it's the skill of the interviewer is to bring the person out. But I was not on form at all. The interview finished, and it's a very, very important interview because it was going to be used to help to promote the ski show, because he was going to be one of the star guests. And I put the phone down and I looked at what I'd written, and I thought, that is appalling. You have been doing this for this number of years, and that's the interview you've got. And, I immediately left the building, and I was utterly distraught because I just thought, you've let yourself down. You haven't just let yourself down. You've let the whole team down, because that was shockingly bad. It was turned around thanks to my brilliant deputy at the time, but I had started leaning on her far too much. I was kind of just trying to get through the day. And so she managed to rescue it. She did it. And then the other thing was, I was writing the Ed's letter. I've written over 70 or 80 editors' letters over the years.
And they're an institution, yeah.
Well, the thing is, you can churn them out really quickly. I never did, because I actually thought, this is the essence of the character of the magazine. You're representing this magazine, therefore they're really important. And so I used to, really craft them, really work them, but they wouldn't actually take them to do, but they were always different. And I did this editor's letter. This was the last issue I worked on. And I was writing it, and I just thought, this is so difficult. And I read it. I've written every single thing here before. This is nothing new. You have dialed this in, and it's taken you an inordinate amount of effort to produce something which is okay. You are in this privileged position. The least you can do is give it everything, and it should be hard, and you should be painful, and you should sometimes go, I don't see the way through. This is all, and you should really work it. So anyway, I did this Ed's letter, and I went home, and the following morning, it was a beautiful, beautiful day, and I was going to cycle into work. And I woke up, and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. That's it. And do you know what? I never, ever went back. Well, no, not quite true. I never worked again for the Telegraph. I phoned up the office and said, look, things aren't right here. I'm not dealing with this. The pressure, the deadlines, I'm not really capable of doing this anymore. And I was signed off with, it sounds a bit dramatic, but I don't know, I was signed off with depression. So I went to the doctor, I've been to the doctor already. And I think depression, burnout, whatever you want to call it, I now can look back. It's only now I can really look back and go, yeah, you were not right. And you hadn't been right. It had been building up for about 3 years, slowly but surely, with few blips up, then down. But the general curve or the line was down. If you look at a graph, it was like that. I absolutely had to stop. And it was the best thing now in hindsight that I did. And I have to say, for the Telegraph, outstanding employer. They looked at it and they supported me throughout every step of the way, pretty much gave me everything I wanted to try and, get me better. That lasted about 6 months, at which point, the way I dealt with it, I did have counseling and medication, but the thing that really, really helped me, I became obsessive about exercise, and I was going to the gym. I mean, when I think about it now, like 3 hours a day, swimming and using the cycle machines. And that was my thing. That's what I focused on. When I came back during the day, I was pretty much just scrolling through social media and really being totally unproductive. But it was kind of, I look at it now, I had the luxury, very fortunate, but that's what I needed to do, was actually do close to nothing, other than the fact it was stop. And, obviously I was looking after my kids and doing the school runs, and that had a structure that had to be met, which is fantastic. Yeah. Those were things that had to be done, and I had to do them, and I did them. And in fact, relish doing it. I got to know my kids again. I now have a much better relationship with them, but I actually needed and was given, for which I'm eternally grateful, close to a year to actually get better. And now, I'm in a much better place. So I was signed off around September time for initially a few months, but it kept on rolling on. Then come February, before the lockdown, February, I was called in and was told actually the magazine they were going to close it down. But very sad, of course. But you know what? For me, in my situation, I was done anyway. I was burnt out. I was never going to go back. Actually, I look at it now. I never could go back. I was done and dusted.
You've alluded to it a couple of times, and I know it's something that a lot of people encounter or start to question, particularly as I think, dare I say it, we start to get older and take on more responsibilities, or stop to question what has happened or where we've got to. And I was just wondering to what extent you felt that other people's expectations or societal expectations, or like you, and in your case, like you said, this outside appearance or outward appearance of you having this dream job actually contributed to you keeping on going, feeling like, actually, I can't stop. There's a voice in me sort of going, you need to stop. You can't keep doing this, but you sort of push through it to the point at which you hit burnout, because it's harder to give in to the signs in a way until you're forced to stop.
Well, I would actually say 3 years. Gosh. I carried on because I was looking at myself as others would look at me, as the guy who had it all. Because I was being told on a very regular basis, boy, you've got the best job in the world. And it also linked into, I could honestly say, for many years, that really was the case.
Yeah.
But it wasn't for the final 3 as a broad time frame. It really wasn't. It was golden handcuffs, actually, and a lack of confidence to think I could do anything else, that I was so closely associated with this title. How would I cope? And who would I be? You're Henry Druce, not the editor.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that was part of the conversation when we initially, discussed you coming on the podcast. And part of it was, well, I'm not this role anymore. Do you still want me? And I think my response was, well, no, I want you. I don't want the role. And I don't think that would be an unusual question, to be honest, that this idea that actually we are delineated, or we are described by that role, and how difficult it is, I think, to start, particularly when we've been something for so long, to feel that there's a way to move away from it. So you touched on it a little bit when you were saying about, you tried obviously various things to support you when you were going through this time. And you talked about how much sport and keeping fit was a sort of an important part of that. And I just wondered, sort of going forward, and as you've started to move into a different way of living and a way of working, has there been something that you found particularly helpful?
Well, without question, exercise is unbelievably important to me. And I think actually it was masking stuff when I was going through serious issues, in that I involved a lot of exercise. I would choose to cycle a lot of the journey into London, which made for a very long day. But I was thinking it kept my sanity by doing this exercise. So it was giving me positive endorphins. But actually, most probably, that was masking an underlying serious issue. Because I reckon I was doing at least 2 hours a day on my bike, on my Brompton, as part of my journey. But I think it was masking the fact that actually I was getting quite, I can look back on it now, I was getting quite seriously ill. So when I stopped doing that journey and then found my way back, well, it's not back, it's way to much better. Did involve exercise too, initially obsessively, in fact. For me, it was the exercise was the key. And now I do less. I don't do I'm not like 3 hours a day. I mean, that's ridiculous. I can't believe it now. And now I'm still pretty fit actually, and I do a lot, but it's more balanced. I do less, but in many respects it's much more effective. Exercise really is crucial, and I can immediately see if I don't do it, it has a very, very quick impact. So it's not a matter of, I'll be to go and exercise. I absolutely fundamentally need to. So that helps give me good balance.
What I find quite interesting is something I've noticed in coming through in your social media posts recently is there seems to be, when you are posting pictures or photos of your mountain biking, whatever adventures you're on, there seems to be a real element of joy behind them. And I was just wondering if exercise being about keeping fit, but also about recapturing some of that passion and joy that maybe you felt earlier on in your career as well.
It's absolutely true that I actually went for a phase quite recently. I was going out on my bike with my mates and stuff, but I wasn't really, this was quite recent, as I say, I wasn't really enjoying it that much. I was thinking, I can't really keep up. Yeah. They're all much better than me. And, I was getting a bit frustrated. And then there was a sort of a shift, as if to say, well, you're not that much slower. All you need to do, if you go to the gym for a couple of weeks, I bet you'll be able to keep up. And you know what? I could. It was simply seeing the things that were looking like hurdles, instead seeing them as, still hurdles, but you knock them down a bit and you go, well, if you do this and this, then you almost probably achieve this. So simple. But when you're in a bit of a bleak place, it doesn't seem simple at all. It seems very complicated. And the reality is, it's not. And it's just being able to see that way forward a bit more clearly. And when you have a slight shift, it makes all the difference. And everyone's different as to how they get into that positive perspective. And sometimes it's just about time. Yeah. You can do any number of things, and it's just about time.
So thinking, I guess, as you think forward, as you've now made that transition and sort of you started to reshape your life in a slightly different mold or way, what are the things that you're thinking, actually, that's something I would, and I hesitate to use the words achieve, but this is a possibility that now feels like it's opened up?
Absolutely. And I have to say, the publisher of In the Snow, when he heard about the magazine going under, he got in contact with me very soon afterwards saying, we must talk. I didn't know him particularly well, but he had seen me. I gave a presentation years and years ago, and it clearly left a bit of an impression with him. And he doesn't appreciate what a positive thing he did in approaching me, because that was a massive boost, thinking, this guy believes in me. I was really thinking, well, that's it. No one in the ski industry is going to want to know me from Adam. I mean, I'm just washed up. So him reaching out was really powerful. So I'm grateful to him. As I say, he doesn't know this. And should he ever listen to this podcast, I'll be a bit embarrassed, but I don't care. But it meant an awful lot. And there were certain people who contacted me, and they knew something, because I didn't go public about it at all. It was just said that, Henry was, I can't even remember what we said. It's just he's off work. He's got personal issues or whatever. So, but some knew or guessed and phoned up and were fantastic, actually, because they mentioned about some of the experience in their lives. And some of them who I thought were just about the most sorted people you could possibly imagine, they open up about their mental health issues. I can't tell you how much it meant to have those conversations. So because of my situation now, because of the Telegraph being very good to me, I have bought some time and working with a couple of days a week, and I managed to secure a brilliant for me, in that I was able to get it, interview with Ski Sunday's Graham Bell, and everything kind of fell into place. And writing the story and doing the video thing with him, and then doing a funny clip about, I don't know if you know, Nikki, he's been big news in the ski world anyway, that he's been chosen to appear in Dancing on Ice. So I had the interview. I knew this was going to happen a few days before, because we'd been out mountain biking, and I'd arranged a kind of a thing to go mountain biking with a few ski industry people, and Graham was there. And then he said, I've got a big thing coming up, but I can't talk about it. It's dead secret. And I was like, well, of course, the journalist in me is like, well, you can't say that and not tell me. But he was adamant. So anyway, we're doing it, have a great ride, and he gets a puncture. And so the rest of the group go off, and I said, don't worry, I'll stay with Graham. I'll help him with his puncture. More than capable of doing it himself, of course. Anyway, as he's doing the puncture, he says, yeah, Henry, Dancing on Ice, I've been chosen. It's fantastic news. And I was like, oh God, let's do the interview. I'm immediately thinking, well, this is fantastic. I'll scoop all my fellow ski journalist friends who, the game is always, always
never leaves else. You, yeah.
we all play the game. So did the interview, and it went really well. And so it was just really good. And now I wrote it up inevitably late on Friday night, because I was arsing around all day looking after the kids and everything else. So I did this, and I phoned up Graham at 10 o'clock, and as I was writing away, and I said, Graham, I want you to read it. Make sure you're happy with it. Will you still be up at 10:30, 11? And he went, I'll be in bed. I was like, oh my God. Okay, how about 6:30 then? He said, yeah, it's fine. And being the true professional he is, he reads it, corrects, I get the name of his daughter wrong. That's one thing you can't get away with. So I do that, and it comes back, and I say to him, so Graham, it's going to be public at midday, as you said. And he goes, no. I've got to rush now, because I've got a BBC interview at 10 to 9. And I say, 10 to 9? Graham, well, thanks for the warning. Because, I've written the story, but it's all got to be uploaded and stuff, which I have no idea how to do. So I go, right, okay. And I ping it across to my publisher, who says he's not going to load it up. One of my colleagues is going to do it. And he says, well, I can't ask her to do it on a Saturday morning. And I'm thinking, for goodness sake, we've got to get this live. Anyway, it does go live very soon after the interview. I get, in my little world of ski, I've absolutely nailed it. And also we've got a bit where the video clip, which goes out the following day, where Graham does a lift on me, as in does a dance, kind of a dance move. Yeah. And if you see it, you just go, oh my God. Because I put 50 quid on him as a wager for him to win. And if you see this lift, you think, he hasn't got a chance. So anyway, it happened. And it's kind of like, in a way, it just kind of feels like I'm not just back. I'm here in a whole new way, working in a way with in the snow, which is a much more loose arrangement. I don't have to go into an office. In fact, I said, do you ever expect me to come to your office? And he said, well, only if you want. You know, the chief editor, the main editor of the title, you know, he lives in Scotland. And my colleague who looks after the social media side of things, she lives in Kent, I think. And, you know, we only ever see each other on the phone. And brilliant. So I never had this feeling about having to go into an office. I was driven nuts by working for a big corporate. In truth, I'm not a big corporate man. It's just not me. But my point being, I just kind of feel that I've been totally liberated from actually what had become golden handcuffs, and working in an environment for me had become utterly toxic and was making me properly ill. So by being out of that environment, being much more feeling like I'm my own boss. You know, I was working late on a Friday night because during the day I happened to have a lunch with a bunch of local dads, and then going off to the football in the afternoon with my kids, and then I was working 3 or 4 hours in the evening on Friday night. Fine, it's my decision. I make my time, and to me that's just brilliant. Yeah, it's been given control, and people having faith in you and thinking, we don't. Yeah, Henry, just get on with it.
If you had one piece of advice for anyone who resonates, or what you're saying really resonates with them, who recognize themselves potentially in your story, or who recognizes somebody they know who might find themselves in the sort of situation, I mean, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I would absolutely say, talk to someone, talk to a close friend if you can, that you feel comfortable with, and that that person will just listen to you. I was very fortunate that I have a particularly good friend, and he was amazing in just listening and kind of letting it all out. I mean, you won't get solutions, but just by the very fact of starting that dialogue of talking makes a huge difference. And also, if you realize it's quite serious, you need to stop. You absolutely need to stop. So that might mean, going to meditation classes or taking up yoga, or just assessing what you're doing and how you can adjust so that to lower the flare points.
Yeah. Such incredibly useful advice, I think. And like I said, I think your story will probably resonate with a lot of people. If people want to find out more about you, or find out more about In the Snow, or what you're doing next, or want to just look at awesome mountain biking videos of people gap jumping.
Well, not me, by the way. Mates of mine who are good riders. I'll take the pictures and take the video.
That's all right. You can't really tell when you ask. You could just take the credit. It's fine. Where can they go? Where can they find you?
Well, they can find me. Instagram is Henry Skier. Facebook, Henry Druce. In the Snow, that's really crucial, because, if you're into skiing and snowboarding, In the Snow is the place to go. It's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, I can't thank you enough for your honesty and your willingness to share your story as well. I know it will be incredibly valuable for a lot of people. And it's just been a pleasure to have a chance to speak to you as well. So thank you so much. And I look forward to chatting to you again really soon.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank Henry again for coming on the podcast and for his courage and generosity in sharing his story. And if you do relate to any of the issues, or they do resonate with you, as mentioned, there are links in the show notes to organisations that can provide support. One thought that I want to leave you with is that mental health is often talked about, or mental ill health is often something we talk about as either having or not having. And I think what Henry's story demonstrates so clearly is that actually it's a continuum, that we're all susceptible at different points in our lives for very different reasons, and that things change over time, and what can work for us at one time in our lives actually may no longer work for us, that it is a fluid continuum that we are all vulnerable to. And I think the other point I just wanted to raise was how, in my experience, whilst there are so many good conversations going on now about it, it is still relatively hidden in terms of people's day-to-day experience. And often people who place great emphasis on achieving or who are high performing can find it really challenging to open up and admit when they are struggling. And that is often why we don't admit it to ourselves or to others. And that can be often a contributor to why burnout happens, as Henry said, by using other mechanisms to mask those feelings and to talk ourselves out of it, because actually we can't be feeling what we are feeling, because look at everything that we've got that we should be grateful. The reality is it's really hard sometimes to listen to those signs, but hopefully Henry's words at the end of just trying to encourage more people to see this as normal and more people to find some way in which they can speak out and reach out about it will go some way to support other people who are experiencing similar things. So thank you again for listening to the podcast today. We will be back next week with another wonderful guest. In the meantime, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram, Resilience at Work. You can find me on Facebook in the Everyday Adventure Club, or visit the website resiliencework.co.uk. And I should also just mention that Henry, since recording the episode, has started a challenge to raise money for Snow Camp, which is a wonderful charity that introduces children to snow sports who might not necessarily get the opportunity. So if you want to visit his Instagram page, he is raising money through random acts of kindness, and I will put the links to his Instagram and Facebook page to do that too, if you want to find out more about the charity or you'd like to donate. Anyway, I really look forward to speaking to you again next week when I have another fantastic guest for you, and I'll speak to you then. Have a great week. Bye.